Hello, chess friends. This is National Master Paul Agron, and today I'd like to talk to you about elementary checkmates. Specifically, in today's lecture, we're going to cover the elementary checkmate, where it is a king with two rooks checkmating a bear king. And another checkmate I'm going to talk to you about is where the king and a queen checkmates the enemy king, and no other pieces are available. So why are elementary checkmates so important? Well, when we reach an endgame and one side has material advantage, this is what we call realizing the advantage. The side with more material, such as in this case we have a king and two rooks, proves that they can checkmate an enemy king. Uh, Often beginners really don't have great mastery of techniques for elementary checkmates, and they reach winning positions and they can't convert. So once again, another checkmate that we'll talk about is the king uh, with the queen versus enemy king. And as we can see, a queen is a very powerful piece covering a little north of the 40% of the board, whereas the rooks cover as well north of the 40% of the board. Each rook covers 14 squares, so combined they cover 28 squares, and the queen covers a similar amount. So these are very powerful pieces. However, the queen by itself cannot checkmate the enemy king, but more on that later. So what other elementary checkmates exist? What other positions are classified as elementary checkmating positions? Well, two bishops, a two-bishop checkmate, such as in this position, and bishop and knight and a king versus the enemy king. This also is an elementary endgame where the side with the material advantage can reach a checkmating position from any configuration of pieces. So let's start. What about two rooks? Well, they're very powerful. As you can see, two rooks, when they are side by side, so to speak, on a rank, they really control this whole area of the board that we can see below. Well, imagine the king somewhere in the middle. Well, that's a checkmating position, where the top rook cuts off the enemy king from escaping, and the bottom rook, whose attacking squares are marked in purple, delivers an actual blow. So this is a position where white is checkmated. And like I said, with two rooks alone, without the help of the king, can actually deliver a checkmate, which is why two rooks are such a powerful duo. That's another checkmating position. So the rooks don't have to be on opposite sides. The rooks can be on the same side and deliver a checkmate like this. And in fact, with the chessboard can be effectively rotated, and we could deliver checkmate to a king at any edge. We could deliver it if the king were cut off on the left, on the right, or even at the top. And in fact, a very interesting pattern comes up in a lot of endgames where the king participates in the capture of the enemy king. And we see in this position, the king is pretty much sandwiched between the horizontal line that the bottom rook controls, and it's actually the top rook that delivers the blow, while the black king prevents the white king from escaping. So we call it a sandwich checkmate. Okay, so let's actually play through a game that could result in a checkmate. Okay, we start here with two rooks on the back rank, so to speak, side by side. So this is a very good position for the rooks to be not, together one under the other, but a little bit off, one square off. Okay, so here black starts by delivering a checkmate and driving the white king to the bottom. White king obliges, and notice how the king steps actually towards the rook. the king actually wants to harass the rooks. He doesn't want to just allow the rooks to drive him to the bottom of the board. But nevertheless, the rook comes down and attacks the white king. So white king is in check, and again he wants to prevent the rooks, he wants to interfere basically with the rook's ability to drive him to the bottom. And so he comes closer, and now had the black rook continued in the same fashion, well, the rook would have been captured. So we need to remaneuver the rooks to the other side so the king can, just kind of do nothing and prevent the other rook from coming down, but we remaneuver the second rook to the left. And now the king starts, again, marching towards the rooks, trying to interfere with them. And so again, the rook checks, the king approaches, the other rook checks, the king approaches, and once again, the rook now on this side can't come down because it would be captured. But no problem. The rook remaneuvers to the other side of the board. Its friend remaneuvers again to the other side of the board, and as the king tries to approach the rook comes down, and finally the king comes to the edge of the board. And now there's many ways to just finish the job, but a simple way to finish the job is just to move the rook to the other side. And now the king is what we call in Zugzwang, because he has to actually move left and allow the rook on the right to come down and checkmate. So like this, and the rook comes down and delivers a checkmate. And this is a typical way you would drive the king either, from top to bottom, or from left to right, or from right to left, or even from the bottom to the top. This is all symmetric, right? The chessboard has 4 edges, and you could drive the king to any edge and kind of, remaneuver the rooks so that they check the king from far away. So this is the general technique that you would follow, checkmate with 2 rooks. And once again, notice that the king does not participate in the dance. Right? The king doesn't need to. The king could help out, but he doesn't need to, because 2 rooks by themselves are sufficiently powerful to checkmate the enemy king. Okay, let's look at the second elementary checkmate that we're going to discuss today, and that's a queen checkmate. So here the queen is again a very, very powerful piece, controls north of 40% of the board, as I already pointed out. So a centralized queen is even more powerful because it controls more squares than the queen in the corner. And here I'm going to skip a whole bunch of moves. So obviously we know the queen by itself cannot checkmate. So one technique for checkmating is to have the king actually walk towards the enemy king and help the queen squeeze the space available for the enemy king to operate in. So I'm going to skip a bunch of moves, and here I'm going to focus on the fact that the chessboard has, with the queen, let's say more or less in the center, but really anywhere, has 4 quadrants. So here we're going to checkmate white king in the upper left quadrant, into the upper left quadrant, to be more precise. And we'll see how that's done. So the king can walk over towards the enemy king, and basically now let's assume it is black to move, and black can check the king and take away, or I should say shrink the upper left box. Okay, so the king is attacked. There's a couple of squares to go to. One square he could go to the left and allow the queen to shrink even more squares, or shrink the box even more. And so here, after the queen moves left, the box is even smaller, and eventually the black king would come up and repeat the exercise and kind of shrink the board. And then we'll see with the other continuation how you would actually deliver checkmate. But let's return to the position that we started with, because remember, in the starting position, white actually had a couple of choices. So the second choice from the starting position after the king got checked is to go up. All right, and here we do something a little different. We step in with the black king and take away some squares. So that's how we do it. We step, and here in the purple, we see the squares taken away by the king. So together, queen and king control a lot of squares. Whereas the queen cuts the king off, the king supports the queen and enables her to squeeze the space out of the board for the white king. So let's assume the white king stepped back. Here, black queen can come up and cut the king off even more. So now there are only 4 squares available to the white king. And let's say he goes to a random square, and now we notice that the king is at the edge of the board. Whenever the king is at the edge of the board, doesn't matter which edge, this is a special position because the queen can just slide down, cut the king off, and now we see that there are only 3 squares available to the white king. And he can gyrate in between all those squares, but really this will enable the black king to come up, and finally this is what we call an in-your-face checkmate. Notice that the black queen is attacking the white king and is taking away all the escape squares. Okay, so that's pretty much the checkmating procedure. And of course, I would recommend that you try it a few times, perhaps against the computer or against a partner, an opponent. But basically, you will master the technique, I would hope, after seeing this video and practicing a little bit. However, there are a few caveats. As you know, there is such a thing as stalemate in chess. So what does it look like with the king and queen on the board? Well, this is a position, a stalemating position. So here the queen is taking all the squares away from the white king, and basically, as well as the other queen, had the king been at h1, it would also have been stalemated. But the king is not in check, and one needs to be careful when cutting the king off, as in the previous example, to not stalemate the king. Believe it or not, a lot of beginners will stalemate the king in many of these positions. And so how can we avoid such things? Well, it's good to show you a few images of squares where basically the queen stalemates the king. So if the king is in any of the corner marked in purple here, and if the king is in any of the purple corners, and the queen is on any of these squares where the queens are placed, this is a stalemated position. So we should avoid these positions. In fact, it is actually a good idea for the queen to be far away from the king, from the enemy king, that is. Because here, for example, if it is black to move, black could checkmate in 1 by placing the queen on a purple square. And this would be another form of in-your-face checkmate. And the reason is that when the queen is far away from the enemy king, this avoids any possibility of one accidentally delivering a stalemate and losing half a point if you're playing a rated game. So thank you, goodbye, and happy chess endings.